people have to understand, like Glassboro has Rowan University, beautiful college, beautiful space, but then you have this other microcosm that's there, and that's people who are really financially hurting. It's like an
Yeah.
urban, it has urban qualities in a suburb, in a college town, like unheard
Mhm.
of, you know? So while I'm going through this and I'm still like with my first grade partner teacher, Missy, and we're, one day the kids, we always took lunch, roll call for lunch in the morning as we said their name, and they would say like what they wanted for lunch if they were buying, if they brought their lunch, or whatever. So this one little girl had said that she brought her lunch. So I'm getting the kids together and I'm like, "Okay, sweetheart, get your lunch." And she brings like one of those little tiny sugary huggy drinks,
Mm.
and she had a little bag of chips, and I mean like a 25-cent bag of chips. And I said, "No, no, baby, not your snack. Go get your lunch." And she goes, "This is my lunch." And I was like, "That's not your lunch." Went and got my purse, walked down to got my wallet, walked down to the cafeteria, of course, with the kids, and I bought her lunch. I was like, "What do you want?" And I bought her lunch. And then that really made me start noticing the food. What are the kids
You were
eating?
paying attention what other kids were eating. Yeah.
Right. So I had this other focus, and all this is while we're planning this garden, and I'm getting to know Brie, and I'm learning about foodscaping, and Brie is telling me how, yes, bring in vegetables, and we're going to do this, and we're going to put food and edibles and ornamentals in this garden. So I'm really looking at now, what are the kids eating? And let me tell you, I got called to the superintendent's office like twice because of me calling out what kids were eating. And this is like after, like a couple years after the garden had been installed. But it was all good.
But like calling it out, like what? Because
On
were you
social media. Oh, I'll
oh
get.
on social media? Yeah.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Then I get
and
it.
did not care, squeaky wheel. So
Yeah, but it's hard because I think like, well, no, okay. I think most parents really want to do what's best,
do.
but
They want to do what's best.
they don't necessarily have the knowledge or the ability.
Exactly. So looking at that food insecurity, what I started doing is looking around like where my kids were living. And both housing developments have like the little bodegas in front. And I would walk, like I walked into one and I was like, there's nothing fresh in here. Nothing. It's all junk food. I go into the other one. I think they had like maybe a couple of bananas. That was it. That was it.
And
And they
are
were
there supermarkets in those neighborhoods, or is it just really these sort of bodegas,
these two
convenience store type
bodegas,
things?
and then it's fast food because it's a college town. So there's
Oh,
pizza places. I mean, literally all around. Pizza places, hoagies, all of this stuff, all this junk food. And the closest supermarket, if you lived in the complex that's the closest to Bullock School, like literally you can walk across the yard and get to this one complex called Hollybush. Um, if you had to walk to the grocery store, you're walking like 2 miles.
yeah, and that's too far.
It's too far. And it's not like you can get the New Jersey Transit to just drop you off at the grocery store. Like that's not something that they do. So if you don't have the means or you need to get there, and I've seen many parents, like when you really open your eyes and you really start, that awareness comes in, you see everything. So I really started seeing like what my kids were bringing to school. And I started really noticing kids being lunch shamed. Like, oh, your parent has a bill. And my partner and I would just go to lunch with our wallets. And quite a few teachers started doing that because we really started talking about like, how are they like doing this to kids? And I mean, we knew a lot of the backstories. Sometimes kids would go to lunch, like that little girl, and just be like, I don't want this, and order what they wanted. And it would just get billed. Parents get a bill. And sometimes these kids were doing it every day. Parents get a bill, and it's like you're being hounded like a bill collector because your kid wanted to eat. And you're a parent who's just struggling to keep the freaking lights on in your house. And you've got like this, they wanted us to put letters in the kids' folders that would say, like, you have a balance and your kid can't get a lunch or anything until you
I
pay this
just
balance.
thought, like,
It was horrible. It
no,
was
I'm kind of
horrible.
wondering, like, I would think, like, there
And
should
this
be
is
like a
first, second,
baseline,
third
like, free
graders.
lunch, and, like, if you want, like, crazy extras, whatever, but, like, get,
Right. But
like
lunch
like,
should be the
milk and something healthy, you know? Like, an app, just have a baseline, like,
they
how are
were
you
getting
supposed to study if you're not.
they would get a cheese sandwich. Cheese, bread, no mayo, no mustard, cheese, sandwich, and milk. What if you're a kid that can't eat wheat? What if you're a kid that's lactose intolerant? What if you just don't like cheese sandwiches? I mean, I'm a mom. My kid would not eat cheese sandwiches when he was little. It's just not what he wanted. And now you're shaming kids for something that at first, second, and third graders, these are kids ages
Young.
5 to 9,
Yeah.
babies. They're babies. And you're telling babies that they can't eat. And then I'm looking at this and I'm talking to parents. And then when I would see that, I would just reach out and be like, hey, like I was one of those teachers, I wasn't afraid to go to your house. And, we would talk to parents and just say, hey, like, we've got this. We'll take care of this. And parents would just spill like what's going on. And that's when I went, okay, we have to make sure we're feeding kids. And when Brie designed that garden, when she brought in all that food, to
Because were
watch.
you thinking foodscaping when you were starting? Like,
No, I was thinking a couple tomato plants and some tulips and maybe a corn. I don't know. I
maybe
had no
we
idea.
should define foodscaping for the people that don't know what that
Oh
is.
my goodness. Well, that is just, it's breaking the thought of the traditional school garden or a traditional garden. So like when you landscape your home, you have this beautiful property, you have shrubs, you have this, you have that, but you can actually plant things that are beautiful that can feed you. So you can have, tomatoes and peppers and nasturtiums that are growing among, your front landscape and blueberry bushes. So as you walk into the house, you can just collect some of this stuff and just go. You can have a beautiful landscape that's actually a food garden or, creating that
So it's
that
not planted as crops, but it's
right.
planted in a beautiful way, but it's a
Beautiful
lot of edible
landscape.
stuff.
Right. So you have that mix of ornamentals and edibles. And that's what we did. That is what we did there. So after it was planted, it was so funny because the next day, everyone's gone. And I was there early in the morning to just sit in the garden and look around. And the teacher who was with me the day that I had asked the principal about doing it, she was with me in the morning. We're sitting there having our coffee. And I was like, yo, what do we do with it now? Sure.
It's the hard part is how do we keep it? Yeah.
What do we do? What do we do? I don't know. Everyone's gone. What do we do? There was a lot of days of me with my phone texting Brie or FaceTiming Brie or calling Ahmed going, what is this? How do I take care of it? What is this bug? And I literally just had to immerse myself again. I had to get my hands dirty. So I spent that entire summer
You have gorgeous
every
nails though,
single
so.
trust me, I had that Jersey girl, like long click
Oh, so this is sort of
nail.
like the toned down version of it.
Oh my god. Well, I have to because now, I'm doing a lot of careful work and I'm running a nonprofit. So I'm doing a lot of typing. So you can't have long claws for that. Um so I sat with Donna and then we really started thinking about how can we embed this into our curriculum. So now we're looking at what is our district telling us that we need to do and how can we embed it. And we started doing that. and we were taking the kids out. And during the summer, we would have days where we would just put on Instagram, like, hey, Miss Harris is going to be in the garden from 9 to noon. Come on over. And they would. Families were
Mhm.
coming, and we were all learning this gardening process together. And then it got to a point over like the next year where the kids were just learning it naturally. And Brie would come back and do days, like she would spend 2, 3 days and like stay here and and we'd go to school together, and she's teaching the kids, planting for fall, planting for spring, planting for summer, and talking to them. And I mean,
And
this
you're
girl
getting seasonality
talking in
concepts.
Latin. Kids are coming to me about like, Miss Harris, this which cultivar is this? And I'll never forget that one day the kid asked me cultivar, and I was like, what do they mean by this? Like, and showing the picture, like, what are they talking about? And we were learning this all together.
Which is great.
So I really, one of the things that I was so proud of was the fact that the families started coming over and harvesting. And I
But
remember,
I think what's interesting and I'm hearing is the school and you were open to that. You allowed that sense of ownership. Because sometimes like
yeah,
the gate gets closed and it's like,
that's right. I refused when people kept telling me put up a fence, and I was like, nope, we're not putting up a fence. Um, it was vandalized once, and it was right after it was built. Some kids over Fourth of
outgrown, yeah.
July went in there and vandalized it. I get a call on like the 6th. The custodian is like, you gotta get down here. The garden was vandalized. There are kids, and this is over the summer. There's kids who are here and they're crying. So I'm like, okay, I'm on my way. I get down there. It's like a blueberry bush was pulled out, a couple tomatoes were squashed, but the children saw this and was like, who would do this to our garden? Because we had built that ownership.
Yeah.
And I would say all the time when the kids would be like, "Oh, your garden." I'm like, "It's not my garden, it's your garden." And we really had that culture in the school where we said to the kids, and the principal even like bought into that and said it to the kids like, "Your garden, your garden." So we had a cleanup day.
So
The
important.
kids in the low income housing developments in the projects, those kids created a garden patrol, and I can't remember what they called themselves, the garden keepers. That's what they called themselves. So these kids, and I mean, not just the kids who went to Bullock, older kids,
Oh,
younger
so they
kids,
didn't even go to the school.
kids who didn't even go to the school, because we
But
have a
because they could go there on the weekend and not.
right. It's open for the entire community.
Yeah.
And these kids were coming on their bikes, and they would come to make sure no one on the weekends was touching the garden. And the kids found out who actually had done it, reported it to one of the school officers. This was a kid who didn't go to Bullock. He went to the other building, the fourth, fifth, and sixth grade building. They told the resource officer. The officer calls me and he's like, "What do you want me to do?" And I was like, "I don't know. Just hate,
Kids are
the
just gonna
kids,
shame him.
kids have done this, like, just like, let them know that you found out who it
Not
was."
cool.
Yeah, never happened again.
Yeah.
And that was 2015. So in 2015,
But I think this is the way it goes. If there's ownership, and like for an example, like in New York City, you have
yeah,
a lot of those movable chairs everywhere.
right.
And when they first were starting that, I think it was the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and
Yeah.
they were convinced that like all the chairs would be stolen. But
That's
the amount of money it would take to lock those chairs down and close it up
yes.
is more than like the one chair that's
In
stolen
the
per
chair. That's right.
year.
That's right. So it's, when I said, when you put up a fence, you say, this is not for you. This isn't yours. This is ours and we don't want you here. And I was like, no, it's going to be open. And then people are like, well, what if deer come? I said, then deer come. This is what we have to teach our children, that this is nature.
There, well,
And then
and then, well, there's just such a large metaphor in this.
I mean, so much. And then we had kids who were coming and, oh, I can't go in the garden because I have my new sneakers. Too bad. Mommy shouldn't have put them on you this morning because you're getting dirty. And then they did. And kids, like the little girls in dresses. And, we have a picture somewhere of this girl, and she is out there. It's a day that Brie had come, and we had the kids getting all of the topsoil and moving it. And she's out there in her dress and her little shoes, just digging away. And it was absolutely incredible. And we started doing like the kids literally play in the garden. I ran and started running garden clubs, and the whole
Explain to that the
school,
garden club. Is that like through the school? Like,
as a teacher, I did it as an after school
okay.
extracurricular.
Like kids that want to get involved and wanted to help take care of it. And
Yeah, I actually did the junior master gardening program with these kids. And because, I was like, oh, I can't be a master gardener because they do all the classes during the day. So when I retired, that was the very first thing that, that I did. But so yeah, I became a Rutgers certified master gardener. Um, so what we started doing is having the kids vote on what do you want to grow, and they would do this during computer class. And the music teacher was doing different things with the kids based on gardening. Like she did this little play with the kids based on gardening. The world cultures teacher would talk about like Cesar Chavez and the importance that he had with farming and farm workers, and everyone bought into this. And because they started teaching kids history, language, reading, science, music, art, everything through gardening, we started noticing that um, the kids were eating healthier, of course, because I had kids that would say, "Can I go get cabbage out of the garden and have that with my lunch?" Yeah, yeah.
cabbage. Kids
I
asking for
will walk
cabbage.
you down there and let you pick whatever cabbage you want. And they're sitting there at their lunch with cabbage leaves, eating cabbage. I had kids pulling radishes out of and I don't like radishes at all. I just don't.
Radishes are like such a satisfying plant to garden with though, because
It's so
like you
fast.
feed them in like 2 weeks, you have a like
Yes.
it's
So,
perfect for kindergarten. And
oh yeah. So we had them everywhere. And the kids would go out and just grab soil. Soil is on this. But I have now taught these kids that soil is health and it's alive and
it
there's
is
microbes and all this stuff because I've
feed the
learned with them.
community.
And they're just eating it with the soil. They're like, "It's okay, Miss Harris, it's worm poop." And I was like, "Do what you do, kids. Do what you do." But because of what we were doing, and I used social media, to show, and like I said, the district was great. Like we were able to, just kind of brand it as the Bullock Children's Garden. I was able to brand that,
Yeah.
and like it has its own symbol, it has its own,
Yeah.
and the Bullock family, who the school's named after, like they were so honored for this because the school is named after the first Black principal in that district. I told you I was one of two Black teachers in that school, first, second, and third grade, over 500 children. And there were times that these kids went from pre-K to third grade and never had a teacher of color. Some of
And
these
are the students
very majority, it's really like a 50-50.
okay?
But um
Why are there so few Black teachers at the school?
that's just something that they've tried to increase. um but I think I don't know. I don't know. And I know that they have looked at, how do we hire more teachers of color, and they've increased that over the years. But this is just at that time, this is just how it was. And you have to replace teachers when they retire or when someone just resigns.
So maybe it's
That
just the demographic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't happening, but the demographics of the town were changing.
Okay. I think it's probably a lot of that.
So yeah, so we ended up getting like a lot of kids who were Hispanic because we had a lot of migrant farm working children, so their families were farm workers, and we were getting a lot of these children. So the time that I was there, those 15 years, I really got to see that demographic change. And as teachers were retiring, things did happen. But it still was still not a really good representation of the populace, of the clientele. Um, so I really started looking at, the kids who were having problems, the kids who were having behavioral problems, and they were a lot of our young black males that we had first, second, third grade having explosive episodes.
That
And
young.
I had talked to the principal and said, well, what if I did this garden club for the high flyers? That's what we call them, the high flyers, the kids who are always in the principal's office.
Because
The
also
kids,
it's like something very physical, so you can use a lot of that physical energy and feel very
right. So I
confident.
I gave up my lunch and I worked with these kids and we actually kind of did research. Um, we picked the top, I think there were 7 kids who had been suspended, who were always in the office. I mean, real behavioral problems. And I did a special garden club with these boys. And there were conditions. Um, they had to meet certain goals through the week and they had to earn like certain points. And if you got those points, then you came to garden club. And when you got to come to garden club, that's when you took care of your plant. And I would tell them, I'm not going to water your plant. I'm not going to take care of it. You're responsible for this. So if you don't earn those points and you don't make it, your plant's going to die.
Mm.
So out of those 7 kids, we only had one that didn't make it, that he ended up needing a different type of program. But 6 young black males learned that they could take control of something and change a course. They learned about being calm, they learned about behavior. And because of these things that we were doing, and we started doing presentations and whatnot, and the word started getting out around the state. Like this teacher down in South Jersey just like bum rushed the school